Welcome to the Clements Bookworm. This is episode 52, and I'm Angela Unk, Director of Development here at the Clements Library. Just in case you're joining us for the first time, I'll mention that we like to use the chat function to, have some community while we're having this program. So please feel free to chime in. You can change the setting to everyone so that we can all see it. My colleague, Kayla Robinson, will also be monitoring the chat and pasting in interesting links for you to look at. Those will also be available in an email after the program. If you have a question, though, please put that in the Q&A section. And you can also see the questions other people are asking and give it a thumbs up to say that you'd like that question answered as well. And it will push it to the top of the list. As part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion program, we have the live machine captions turned on today. You can toggle those on or off and change the size if you so choose. And we also have side-by-side mode enabled, which should allow you to see both the slides and the speaker, and you can move the separator to change the relative size of each. This program is brought to you by the William L. Clements Library, located on the campus of the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Our mission is to collect, preserve, share, and promote the study and discussion of primary sources related to all aspects of history and culture of North America and the Caribbean to 1900. As a descendant of the Saginaw Chippewa tribe, I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge that the University of Michigan is located on the territory of the Anishinaabe people. In 1817, the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations made the largest single land donation to the University of Michigan, offered ceremonially as a gift in the text of the Treaty of the Foot of the Rapids, so that their children could be educated in a Western manner. We acknowledge the history of Native displacement that allowed the University of Michigan to be founded. And today we reaffirm contemporary and ancestral Anishinaabe ties to this land and their profound contribution to this institution. In addition, the William L. Clements Library acknowledges that it has and continues to benefit from the original land dispossession and established hierarchies of settler colonialism. Today, I am excited to welcome and introduce Dr. Nazera Wright, Associate Professor of English and African American and Africana Studies at the University of Kentucky. She is the author of Black Girlhood in the 19th Century, which won the 2018 Children's Literature Association's Honor Book Award for Outstanding Book of Literary Criticism. Her digital humanities project, Digital Girls, Mapping Black Girlhood in 19th Century, documents the cultural activities of Black girls living in Philadelphia in the 19th century. In 2019, she was elected to the American Antiquarian Society. Fellowships through the Ford Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Bibliographical Society of America, and the American Philosophical Society funded archival research for her second book, Early African American Women Writers and Their Libraries. And she'll be sharing that research with us today. Paul Erickson, the Randolph G. Adams Director of the Clements Library, will be in conversation with Professor Wright, and I'm delighted to turn it over now to you both.
Great. So Nazera, I think it is up to you to share your screen and take us away.
Okay, great. Here. Thank you, Angela, for that wonderful introduction. I would like to thank Paul Erickson and Clements Library, and Angela for inviting me to present my research. I look forward to our conversation after my presentation. So the title of my talk today is Frances E.W. Harper's Library Ticket. My first book, Black Girlhood in the 19th Century, traces representations of Black girlhood in early African-American print and visual sources in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The archival methods I learned led to my second book project. Early African-American women writers and their libraries traces the influence of libraries and historical repositories on the literary careers of early African-American women writers. I consider how public and private libraries functioned as gateways to African-American women's literary authority, and I explore how Black women navigated these institutions that often rendered them invisible. Excluded from many educational spaces and institutions in the 19th century, African-American readers and writers used libraries to pursue ideals of liberal education and to contest the widespread belief in their inferiority. I extend Elizabeth McHenry's 2002 text, Forgotten Readers, Recovering the Lost History of African-American Literary Societies, in which she argues that African-Americans' access to Black newspapers and literary societies encouraged citizenship by gaining a literary character. Citizenship pursuits in a literary character may also occur through reading early instructional manuals that taught enslaved and newly free people literacy at an early age. My lecture today examines Frances E.W. Harper's use of libraries in her serialized fiction and her access to the Mercantile Library of Philadelphia in the 1880s. But first, I demonstrate how Harper belongs to a long tradition of early African-American writers and activists incorporating educational manuals into their writing. I call these manuals, quote, portable libraries. These manuals were often hidden from view and read in secrecy and isolation. I draw on Hortense Spiller's 1987 essay, Mama's Baby, Papa's Maybe, an American grammar book, where Spillers examines how the formation of a national consciousness in a democracy necessitates a grammar or a disciplined way of life. A grammar is a practice, a way of knowing that becomes so rote and routine that it becomes habit. Penmanship manuals are grammar books. Copybooks, spelling books, are also grammar books that encourage ritualized, disciplined behavior. Early Black writers incorporate instructional manuals into their texts to teach Black populations that at an early age, people can be trained into the citizenry. Lucy Terry, who is often cited as the first Black person to write a poem titled Bar's Fight in 1746, was sold to enslavers in Deerfield, Massachusetts in 1728. Terry earned a reputation as an avid storyteller and creator of poems. Lucy Terry's biographer, Gretchen Holbrook Gerzina, examines Terry's literacy as an enslaved girl living in colonial New Hampshire in the 1880s. When Terry gains her freedom and gets married, the couple buys reference books. Gretchen Gerzina writes, quote, "As soon as they could, they purchased a secretary's guide, an all-purpose reference book that showed them how to handle business letters, accounting, and the necessary methods of keeping track of their work and finances. As Gerzina explains, quote, Lucy Terry and her husband were a couple who had never written their own narrative and whose family papers were lodged in no library, yet every detail we found said something not just about the princes, but about Black people all over New England, end quote. Lucy Terry likely had a private library in her home to hold her reference books. The frontispiece to Phyllis Wheatley's 1773 collection of poems on various subjects, religious and moral, inaugurates a tradition of early African-American handwriting and penmanship practices. Those familiar with the Renaissance trope of the scholar sitting at his desk in his study would associate Wheatley with St. Jerome, typically understood as male. Wheatley's frontispiece conveys that a Black girl can be a scholar who knows the rules of penmanship, and these rules are not assigned to men. Wheatley models a form of freedom visualized through thinking, imagining, her posture, command of her quill, and placement of paper on her desk. Wheatley's frontispiece models visually what is taught theoretically in early American penmanship manuals. When the Black enslaved engraver Scipio Moorhead creates Wheatley's frontispiece, he likely referenced George Bickham's 1743 text, The Universal Penman. However, Wheatley's poised posture, perfect positioning of quill in hand and paper on desk anticipates future penmanship manuals. In The Art of Penmanship, published in 1819, in a manual titled A New and Easy Introduction to the Art of Penmanship, James Carver writes, quote, let the forefinger lie directly on the back part of the pen. Let the third and fourth fingers be bent naturally under toward the hollow of the hand. Let the paper be placed exactly square with the writing desk. Let the right arm lay easy and light upon the desk. Is not this exactly how Moorhead positions Wheatley? Wheatley's display as a scholar dismantles racist perceptions of Black people which circulated in early America. In Easy Lessons for Infants, with a chapter titled The Black Boy, published in 1844, the author compares Wheatley's collection of poems against the perceived laziness of a Black boy. In the story, two white girls gaze upon a Black boy as he sleeps. Quote, see, under that haystack lies a Black boy. He has been at work with the haymakers. They are gone to the field for more hay, and he has fallen asleep, end quote. The girl describes the boy's enslavement, quote, he has left his parents and friends a great way off in a land far away from the sea, far away over the sea. The girl references Wheatley and her poems, quote, are there any Black girls, said Mary, for I never saw one. Oh yes, said Lucy, and I have seen a book of poems that was written by one, but it is now time to go to dinner and we will talk about them another time, end quote. In the early American imagination, Wheatley models intellectualism, industriousness, and creativity. The story places Wheatley in an instructive role and the reading public as her pupils. In this way, Wheatley disrupts and challenges the enslaver-enslaved relationship. In Article 2 of David Walker's 1828 appeal, Walker writes, quote, I have examined schoolboys and young men of color in different parts of the country, in the most simple parts of Murray's English grammar, and not more than 1 in 30 was able to give a correct answer to my interrogations, end quote. In his 1845 autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, Douglass discusses how copybooks contributed to his literacy during enslavement. Quote, "My copybook was the board, fence, brick wall, and pavement. My pen and ink was a lump of chalk. With these, I learned mainly how to write," end quote. Douglass continues to discuss his use of copybooks to learn how to write. Quote, "I then commenced and continued copying the italics in Webster's spelling book until I could make them all without looking on the book. I used to spend the time in writing in the spaces left in Master Thomas's copybook, copying what he had written," end quote. Douglass references Webster's The American Spelling Book, published in 1792. The American Spelling Book and Lindley Murray's English Grammar, which David Walker discusses, were the dominant pedagogical textbooks in the United States between 1800 and in the 1830s. These manuals would have been available in general stores or for loan in subscription libraries issued by publishers having reaches in the regional and national markets. The fables published in Noah Webster's American Spelling Book served a pedagogical purpose for youthful learners. Stories depicting animals instilled moral lessons meant to be incorporated in daily life, a function that was not lost on Douglass. Martina and Mary Ann Dickerson's friendship albums, housed at the Library Company of Philadelphia, were pedagogical exercises when the sisters were 11-year-old sixth graders in Black writer and activist Sarah Mapps Douglass's 1834 School for Black Girls. These friendship albums also function as portable libraries with written and artistic contributions offering advice on racial awareness and literary taste. Beyond a pleasurable pastime, Black girls' participation in the genre of album keeping encouraged them to interact with artists and activists in their networks. Harriet Jacobs had access to 3 libraries to write her slave narrative, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, published in 1861. The garret in Jacobs's grandmother's house, in which Jacobs hides for 7 years to evade capture during slavery, which I argue doubles as a private library. The anti-slavery reading room and circulating library that Jacobs and her brother John opened for 9 months in Rochester, New York in 1848. And Jacobs's use of Nathaniel P. Willis's private library in his Idlewild estate, located in New York's Hudson River Valley, to write her slave narrative as she cares for Willis's 5 children as a fugitive slave. In African-American writer Julia C. Collins's post-Civil War novel, The Curse of Caste, or The Slave Bride, serialized in the Christian Recorder in 1865, Claire, an orphaned Black girl, reads from her seminary school library books in the North, graduates, travels south to work as a governess, and discovers through conversations in a private library that her employer is her white grandfather. I explore libraries in early seminary schools and private libraries in people's homes after the Civil War. The Brown Family Library Project is a private collection of books from a Black family who lived in Worcester, Massachusetts in the 19th century, now housed at the American Antiquarian Society. In an 1871 book titled Richard Vandermark, a Novel, Bernice Brown, a daughter in the family, illustrates herself in the margins of the book. Black girls building private libraries in their homes in the 19th century contributes to the intellectual history of Black girls. The often uncatalogued signatures and inscriptions collected in Black girls' autograph albums also functioned as libraries. Sally and Miranda Venning were two sisters from a middle-class African-American family in Philadelphia. Their albums reveal that Black girls were building alliances that would widen their networks, contribute to their intellectual development, and connect them to a Black elite. But today, I examine another portion of my second book, Frances E.W. Harper's membership in Philadelphia's Mercantile Library, an institution designed primarily for the social climbing of white men interested in learning trades. Harper loaned her Mercantile Library ticket to other Black women writers, such as Gertrude Bustill Moselle. In the talk that follows, I will discuss library scenes in Frances E.W. Harper's short story, Chit Chat or Fancy Sketches, serialized in the Anglo-African magazine in 1860. I end with close readings of library scenes in Harper's 3 serialized novels published in The Christian Recorder, Minnie's Sacrifice, published in 1869, Sowing and Reaping, a temperance story published between 1876 and 1877, and Trial and Triumph, published between 1888 and 1889. In an article titled Acknowledgement, published Saturday, February 6, 1886, in African-American women writer and activist Gertrude Bustill Moselle's advice column, Our Women's Department, serialized in the New York Freeman, Moselle recognizes Frances E.W. Harper's loaning her library ticket as instrumental to the column's success. Quote, "We desire to return thanks to those who by their valuable hints, comments, and suggestions have added to the future usefulness of this column. Mrs. F.E.W. Harper has kindly extended the use of her private library and the use of her Mercantile Library ticket," end quote. Moselle's acknowledgement situates Black women in a 19th century institution. Philadelphia's Mercantile Library was established in 1821. When the Mercantile Library of Philadelphia closed in 1989, the Free Library of Philadelphia absorbed its records. When Harper extends the use of her private library to Moselle, she replicates the functioning of a public library in her private home to give other Black women access to books that they may not otherwise have in institutional spaces. Harper's gesture to make public her private book collection tells a larger story of history making, legacy making, and Black women asserting freedom in private and institutional spaces after the Civil War. Individuals listed in the quote acknowledgement section of Moselle's advice column reveal the diverse network of people with whom Moselle associated. As Eric Gardner observes, the printing of acknowledgements, quote, functioned as receipts for subscribers and may have also encouraged new subscriptions or renewals by publicly commending subscribers, end quote. Users of the Mercantile Library of Philadelphia were shareholders of the library. Each patron had to purchase a share in the library each year to use its resources. The quote, library ticket was proof that Frances Harper was a paid subscriber. Harper and Mosell's relationship reveals transgressive practices in which Black women writers engaged to gain access to research libraries at the end of the 19th century. So in the 1880s, subscription libraries in Philadelphia transitioned from private libraries to public institutions. The historical sketch of the Mercantile Library Company of Philadelphia, prepared by Charles Gobert, explains how in 1886, the directors of the Mercantile Library extended the privilege of reading books in reading rooms to the general public, merely requiring that visitors inscribe their names in a register at the entrance gate. Although this arrangement excluded the public from other rooms in the library, such as the chess room and the periodical and newspaper rooms, the transition gave the reading public access to books on the shelves. This erasure of class distinctions meant that knowledge was no longer a privilege reserved for the wealthy. The rules continued to evolve, which likely enabled Harper to share her library ticket with Moselle. 1886 bylaws and library rules of the Mercantile Library states that to gain admittance, one must show a ticket rather than register a name. Quote, those who are not members shall register their names and residences in a book provided for the purpose on each visit before entering the library. Those desiring to avoid the necessity of registering their names every time they enter may on application receive tickets, entitling them to consult the books for the current calendar year. The tickets to be always shown on entering the room, end quote. This ticket is likely what Moselle references in her acknowledgement in her newspaper column. Archival records indicate that in 1886, the year Harper loans Moselle her Mercantile Library ticket, a debate among Mercantile Library shareholders caused a gender divide. On February 16, 1886, women members of the Mercantile Library stood for election because they were concerned with the mismanagement of the library. Although election results revealed the women on the ballot were defeated, Harper and Moselle were likely aware of this debate and may have participated in the proceedings, all of which occurred in February 1886, the same month as Moselle's acknowledgement. Library scenes in Harper's serialized fiction critique the changing racial landscape before and after the Civil War. In Frances E.W. Harper's Chit Chat or Fancy Sketches, a short story serialized in the Anglo-African magazine in 1860, the protagonist, Jane Rustick, and her Aunt Miranda discuss Black community activism in Aunt Miranda's private library. Harper urges her readers to subscribe to the Anglo-American magazine and build libraries in their homes by collecting Black newspapers. Quote, we must try to sustain the Anglo-African. I want the Anglo-African to live at least as one of our monuments. I have the first volume. It was presented to me nicely bound, and it forms one of the valued books in my small library. I would like to see the book bound in the houses of our people and kept in existence as something to stimulate our young people to an interest in their improvement and progress. End quote. After the Civil War, Harper critiques private libraries in homes throughout her 3 serialized novels, rediscovered and edited by literary scholar Frances Smith Foster. Harper's decision to publish her fiction in serial form in the Christian Recorder gave a growing African-American reading community access to her work. Serialization helped democratize literature by putting new work into the hands and homes of every economic and social class on a regular basis. We can well imagine the serialized stories being read aloud to new arrivals to northern cities who had left the South for better opportunities. The Christian Recorder, a Black newspaper, was a logical choice for Harper. The African Methodist Episcopal Church, which published the journal, was her religious home and was one of the leading venues where Black writers could publish fictional anecdotes and serialized novels. Subscribers to the Christian Recorder had access to information about diverse issues and African-American voices that were otherwise absent from the dominant print culture. In Mini Sacrifice, serialized in the Christian Recorder in 1869, Harper associates private libraries to racist views and archaic perceptions of progress and advancement. A private library is the setting where Camilla, a daughter of a white enslaver, Bernard Lacroix, encourages her father to adopt a mixed-race enslaved boy named Louis and raise him as white. Bernard Lacroix's private library on his plantation is furnished with reminders of a racist slaveholding economy. Mini Sacrifice opens with Harper introducing Bernard Lacroix's character primarily through his descriptions in his private library. The private library's lush interior and royal furnishings reflect greed, an excess of wealth, and an absence of humanity. Bernard Lacroix grew up wealthy on a plantation in Louisiana. He becomes, quote, passionately fond of literature and, quote, aesthetic in his tastes, end quote. He, quote, devoted himself to poetry and the ancient classics, filled his home with the finest paintings and the most beautiful statuary, and had his gardens laid out in the most exquisite manner, end quote. Bernard's wife, a Haitian woman, dies, unable to survive in a house filled with the trappings of wealth built on the labor of her own people. After his wife's death, Bernard retreats to his private library and he remains secluded and isolated. He, quote, sought no society, seemed to lose all interest in politics, and secluded himself in his library till he had almost passed from the recollection of his nearest neighbors, end quote. He raises his daughter, Camilla, alone. Bernard's attachment to his private library contributes to his daughter's limited worldview. Rather than send her to an actual school, Bernard Lacroix, quote, superintended the education of his daughter because, quote, he could not bear the thought of being separated from her, end quote. Camilla's education consisted of, quote, reading only from the best authors, both ancient and modern, end quote. And she was, quote, growing up with very little knowledge of the world except what she learned from books, end quote. Camilla's lack of exposure makes her a clone of her father's antiquated thoughts on slavery. The library keeps the father and daughter trapped in an older way of viewing the world. Harper associates the private library with a pre-Civil War sensibility. When Camilla visits the slave quarters to find Miriam, an enslaved woman grieving over her dead daughter, Camilla expresses grief, but then discovers a newborn baby sleeping next to the dead mother. The baby is a mulatto, the son of Agnes and a white man, most likely her own father. Camilla pleads with her father, Bernard Lacroix, to allow the child and its grandmother to reside in their home, to be raised and educated as if they were his son. This scene occurs in the father's private library. Camilla finds her father, quote, seated in his library reading Homer and begs him to raise the boy. Lacroix replies, quote, still, he belongs to the Negro race, and one drop of that blood in his veins curses all the rest. I would grant you anything in reason, but this is not to be thought of. Were I to do so, I would immediately lose caste among all the planters in the neighborhood. I would be set down as an abolitionist and singled out for insult and injury. Ask me anything, Camilla, but that, end quote. Camilla replies angrily, quote, "Oh, Pa, what do you care about social position? You never hunt, nor entertain company, nor take any part in politics. You shut yourself up in your library year and pore over your musty books, and hardly anyone knows whether you are dead or alive," end quote. Camilla shames her father through his association with his library as a place of seclusion, narrow-mindedness, and non-sociable behavior. Camilla continues, quote, "Now, Father, I do think it is a shame for this child to be a slave when he is just as white as anybody. I would like him for my brother, and he looks like us anyhow." Camilla's innocent accusation of the father's rape of Agnes because Lacroix, quote, "flushed deeply at these words and agrees to raise the child and hide his origin." By using the setting of a private library to expose rape and racial secrecy, Harper aligns private libraries with hidden secrets and archaic views of race and advancement. Harper links private libraries with intemperance in her second serialized novel, Sowing and Reaping, a Temperance Story, serialized in the Christian Recorder between 1876 and 1877. At the end of Harper's novel, a scene in a private library determines the untimely fate of a main character. The private library scene teaches readers that poor moral choices will hurt the younger generation. Harper introduces readers to Jeanette Rowland, a young Black socialite who drinks heavily. Jeanette dismisses advice from her friend, Belle, to stop serving alcohol at parties. Belle is a young Black woman perceived as, quote, odd, due mainly to her lack of wealth and high morals. Against Belle's advice, Jeanette marries Charles Romaine, a son of a wealthy businessman who turns out to be a drunkard. Jeanette's decision to continue to serve alcohol at parties has deadly results for her new husband. When Charles and his wife lose their first baby to illness, Charles falls into despair and begins to drink heavily. Jeanette and Charles eventually have another child, and, quote, joy began to blossom around Jeanette's path, end quote. Jeanette's father invites the couple to his home for dinner, but Jeanette is unwell, so she decides to remain at home. Mrs. Romaine is cautious not to serve alcohol at the dinner table. However, after dinner, quote, Mr. Romaine invited Charles into the library to smoke, end quote. Mr. Romaine, Jeanette's father, offers Charles a cigar and continues to say, quote, by the way, here is some rare old wine, more than 25 years old, which was sent to me yesterday by an old friend and college classmate of mine. Let me pour you out a glass, end quote. After drinking the wine, Charles, quote, suddenly became agitated, and he displayed a, quote, sudden paling of his cheek. He, quote, took the glass and drained it to the bottom, end quote. As with Minnie's sacrifice, a harmful generational legacy of private libraries reappears. It is in Jeanette's father's library where Charles is seduced into taking another drink of wine. As with Bernard Lacroix and Camilla, Jeanette's father's sins and mindset have a hazardous influence on the younger generation. Harper paints the library as a place of secrecy, seduction, and sin. While the library is intended to impart knowledge and uphold literacy, Harper uses the library to reveal how immorality, excess, and intemperance are intertwined. By the end of the novel, Charles Romaine gets drunk from the wine, passes out on his way home, and freezes to death outside. Harper's third serialized novel in the Christian Recorder between 1888 and 1889 is Trial and Triumph, which tells the story of a Black girl who comes of age in an urban city in the North in the post-Civil War years. Harper's novel becomes a platform for delivering messages to the Black community that were featured in her lectures after the Civil War and into the late 19th century. The novel's remarkable feature is the absence of institutions and organizations that lobbied for the rights of Northern and Southern Black people in these decades. The novel's goal was to promote change at the pre-institutional level within the homes of Black families. In Trial and Triumph, Harper reimagined private libraries as parlors in which Black women opened their homes to hold parlor meetings. These intimate spaces in the home become public meeting grounds for young Black women seeking advice from women of an older generation. In the novel, a Black woman in the community, Mrs. Lizette, opens her home for, quote, mothers' meetings and provides a place for young Black women to socialize safely. She takes a mentor. She takes as her mentee Annette, a poor Black girl from the community who is being raised by her grandmother, Mrs. Harcourt. Mrs. Lizette believes in Annette's intellectual abilities, which Mrs. Harcourt seemed to want to diminish. Quote, at first she read when she had leisure to beguile her lonely hours, and fortunately for her, she was directed in her reading by Mrs. Lizette, who gave and lent her books which appealed to all that was highest and best in her nature, and kindled within her a lofty enthusiasm to make her life a blessing to the world. With such an earnest purpose, she was not prepared to be a social favorite in any society whose chief amusement was gossip and whose keenest weapon was ridicule, end quote. Mrs. Lizette lends Annette books, but most likely from her own private library. In the same way, Frances Harper lends Gertrude Moselle books from her private library. Through this lending of books, Harper cultivates Black women and girls' intellectualism. In the late 1880s, the message of hope and a brighter future in Trial and Triumph was likely encouraging to this population. Frances E.W. Harper believed that Black women who had resources should open their homes and allow Black girls and young Black women access to books. Harper's version of activism centers generosity and sharing to encourage intellectual development. She teaches her readers about the value of libraries in Black homes to educate Black children. Yet, Harper also understands the limitations. Harper values leaving the home to conduct research, and she encourages her readers to go where the knowledge is and learn. Reading early African-American writing through the lens of libraries offers a unique contribution to African-American literary history. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nazera. That was great. Angela has some housekeeping announcements before we jump into the Q&A.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That was indeed wonderful. And just in case you signed on after we gave the discount code, Professor Wright's book, Black Girlhood in the 19th Century, is available with a 30% off discount code. So you can check that out. And now I just want to mention that we are starting to kick off some centennial events at the Clements Library. And in March, we have 2 events featuring our legacy of the Albert Kahn designed building. So the Bookworm will have Michael Hodges and Carol Rose Kahn in conversation. Michael Hodges is the author of Building the Modern World, Albert Kahn in Detroit, and Carol Rose Kahn is the granddaughter of Albert Kahn. So we'll hear more from both of them. And then on Sunday, March 19th, we are hosting an in-person event at the Clements Library with the Albert Kahn Legacy Foundation. So you can see more at the link provided. Our student curated exhibit continues to be available. Family Secrets, Uncovering Identity in 19th Century America. You can visit it at the library on Mondays and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. or take a behind the scenes tour. The next one is coming up on Friday, February 24th at 4 p.m. Then also in March, we'd love to see you in person at the John W. Shai Memorial Lecture. It's featuring Fred Anderson, and the title of his talk is From a New Military History to a Grand Narrative for North America, The Surprising Legacy of John Shai. And you can register for that event and read more about it with the link provided. And all of these links will also be in the follow-up email. We're always so happy to have you here with us. And if you're interested in helping to sponsor the Bookworm, please contact me or Anne, and we appreciate your participation and, as you are able, your monetary support as well. Thank you. All right, Paul, have you had a chance to look at the Q&A a little bit? Oh, you're muted.
I haven't. I have some questions of my own.
Perfect.
I want to ask Nazera, because this is such fantastic work, and it's so great to hear about it. And as I said in the chat, folks should buy that book. It's really, really wonderful. So the first question I have, Nazera, in your first book, you have a quote from Bell Hooks that says, "Not enough is known about the experience of Black girls in our society." And then I'm not sure if that was the thing that sort of set you on the course of writing that first book, but your book really wonderfully answers that question. So how did you come to write the second book? Was there something that sort of set you on that path in the same way?
Thank you for that question. Yes, as I conducted extensive archival research for the first book, then I learned research methods on how to kind of uncover lost histories or buried histories of Black girls. I read so many different types of literary genres, not just novels or short stories or poems, but I learned that there are other kind of texts that we as literary and history scholars should be reading to kind of unearth these intimate histories of Black girlhood or lost histories of Black girlhood. So even as I wrote the first book, I was thinking about my second book, which is often the case with us scholars. But I've always been attracted to libraries, and I knew when I finished Black Girlhood that I wanted to learn even more about Black girls. I wanted to learn how they became educated, how they became intellectual, what kind of resources were available to them, what kind of access to books did they have? How did these Black girls that I wrote about in Black Girlhood in the 19th century learn to be literate or learn to be intellectual? And so these are the questions that I wanted to answer. And I looked at myself as a model. I mean, as a young girl, I've always been attracted to libraries. My mother took us to the library during the summer. I remember getting my first library card. We would spend afternoons in the library. I probably wasn't even 10 yet. And the bookmobile would come to our neighborhood, and I would go to the bookmobile with my sisters like every Saturday. As I grew older, then the library was such a central part of my life. When I was an undergraduate at UVA, I worked in the rare books reading room. As a master's student at Howard University, I volunteered at Moreland Spingarn. I won a fellowship to the manuscript division at the Library of Congress. And so I thought about these early experiences of me in reading rooms and libraries, and how I've always been attracted to my own intellectual growth and nurturing the papers of other Black writers. And then once I earned my PhD, then I set on the path of conducting extensive archival research. And so I visited the reading rooms of the American Antiquarian Society, the Library Company of Philadelphia, and oftentimes I was the only Black woman in the reading room for days. And that takes a toll on a scholar. It's something I thought about as I researched book number 1. Why aren't there more people who look like me enjoying this beautiful space and learning from these documents? I had access to these materials, which made my book really rich. And I wanted others to know about these experiences too. And so those experiences also kind of made me want to write this second book. How do Black girls have access to libraries? How do libraries impact their intellectual development? I learned to read sources such as autograph books, autograph albums. These are kind of literary texts that we should focus more on to kind of learn more about the histories of Black girls and their intellectual development. Because if they didn't have access to libraries, then other Black activists had to write poems and messages that kind of functioned as books and functioned as kind of reading material for these young Black girls. So yes, that's the long answer to your question, Paul. I use myself as a model. I use my background in archival research and my love of reading rooms and historical repositories.
Thank you so much. And you have spent time in a lot of the great research libraries in the United States, and some places that are very near and dear to my heart, certainly. So in your first book, your research relies on both some sort of highlights of 19th century African-American literature, sources that are pretty well known, like Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of the Slave Girl, and Freedom's Journal and the Colored American, but also a lot of really hard to find sources, especially the post-Civil War newspapers and periodicals you rely on. So can you talk a bit about your research for this book, and what some of your sources were, and what were some of the challenges that you encountered in finding them?
Thank you for that question. When I give lectures, people ask me this question frequently, and I think it could be a teaching moment, especially for graduate students interested in archival research and kind of uncovering the lost histories of any type of population. My population happens to be Black girls. Another graduate student or a young scholar may be wanting to learn how to find lost histories of another type of, population from an early period. And so when you mention more canonical texts like Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl versus very rare and hard to find texts, that's a kind of methodology that I do on purpose, because it's important to anchor your work with well-known text if you're going to use lesser known text. And this is not any kind of methodology that someone taught me. I had to teach myself this to make the book legible to a larger reading audience. Because the larger reading audience, they know who Frederick Douglass is, they know Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. People know Frances Harper, well, many people do, but people are unfamiliar with autograph books, and people are unfamiliar with Miranda and Sarah Venning from Philadelphia, young Black girls who lived in Philadelphia. And people are unfamiliar with the library ticket of the Mercantile Library. And so that's one way to answer your question, is to kind of align canonical texts with the non-canonical, lesser known texts, to help to elevate these non-canonical texts so that other scholars and students can learn, like, there are other different types of literary genres and literary texts that we need to be reading to kind of uncover histories of Black people, whether they're young Black girls or young Black boys, that we can't only rely on slave narratives and novels. We have to dig deeper to find this information, because it's not in plain sight. It just isn't. And so yes, some of the roadblocks I've encountered are just long hours in the reading room. But these aren't just roadblocks, they're challenges, because there are archivists who work at the American Antiquarian Society and the Library Company who know me well now because I've asked so many questions. And so if you don't understand a document, if you don't know how to tell a story around it, you talk to one of the archivists, and they can talk you through and help you understand how to weave this material into your own larger argument. How do you tell a story about a document that you don't recognize, like a foreclosure document on a Black family's home from the 19th century? I didn't know how to read that. I didn't know how to understand it within a context of their financial statements. So I'm reading banking statements and financial statements from a Black family from like 1820, and it's just a chart with numbers. And so I had to gain help in learning how to understand this document and what it means for the family's future. And so, yes, writing this second book and doing the research has really deepened my understanding of different archival sources. It helps me to understand that I'm a strong researcher, and that I've learned a lot from book 1 to book 2. I want my readers to see that growth in me. I want people to recognize that growth when they read the second book, and that's the impact that I want to make as well. Yes.
Thank you. That's really fascinating, and I just want to underscore to anybody who's doing research in a library like the Clements or the Antiquarian Society, the staff are there to answer questions. So if there's something you see that you don't understand, please ask. And it's also the case that the staff may not know the answer either, but we're here to help figure it out together. Because I'm surprised, I learn new stuff every day about stuff that I see. So some questions from the Q&A. Tom has a couple questions about Black literacy in early America that I think are probably pretty common. So one question is, did more African-American women work in households and therefore have more access to reading material than African-American men did? And what do we know about different literacy rates between Black men and women in the 19th century?
Yes. That's a great question. Talking about gender and literacy in the early decades of the 19th century. So in my first book, then I explored Black newspapers that circulated in the North, and I focused on columns devoted to children. So children's literature columns that were actually published in these Black newspapers, and so these columns were oftentimes read aloud to Black families living in the North. If the newspaper circulated to the South, then enslaved families likely read these children's columns too, just to kind of teach them about Black family structure and show them what a Black family structure looked like, because the perception that enslaved people were illiterate is not true. These Black newspapers found a way to be circulated to the South, and they were hidden from view, and Black families learned, and enslaved people learned from reading material. And that's well documented with David Walker's Appeal as well. And so some of the columns directly identified women and boys and girls. They said, boys, help your fathers with their household chores. I mean, with the household work, like outside work, like baling hay and doing brickwork, and girls, help your mothers with cooking and cleaning. I mean, it was all very stereotypical kind of separate fears type of advice given to Black children. You know, the boys were taught to be industrious and go to school, and the girls were taught to help your mothers in the kitchen and be obedient. But I think even though the advice and the lessons taught to Black boys and girls differed, I think literacy was expected across the board for Black girls and boys. So Black girls went to school and Black boys went to school. But one point that I will highlight in my introduction to this second book is that I looked at articles on libraries in the early Black press. And so I noticed that there is an overwhelming emphasis on Black boys learning literacy than Black girls, especially because I didn't really look at children's columns this time. I looked at overall articles on building libraries in your home, how people in the North should try to go to some of the reading rooms that were started in the North, and mainly Black boys were pointed out as the ones who should visit these institutions. So that's why my chapters on Black girls' literacy in book 2 are so important, because sometimes I don't think literacy was emphasized to Black girls. And so that's why educators like Sarah Mapps Douglas, who started her own school for Black girls in 1834 in Philadelphia, she understood the importance of educating Black girls.
Thank you. I think people often underestimate how literate 19th century America was in general, and especially African-American communities. I mean, especially in the North, literacy rates were incredibly high. So Cheryl has a question about Claudia Stokes' book, Old Style, another friend from the C19 world. And this connects to the sort of handwriting books and writing manuals that you mentioned. Claudia argues that the emphasis on learning conventional writing actually opened opportunities for women and others to emerge as writers on their own. Can you talk a little bit about Claudia's argument there about the sort of writing instruction manuals?
Yes, I'm glad that I'm glad that Cheryl recommended Claudia's book, because even though I own it, I read this, I'm aware of the book, then I have to revisit this book because I haven't actually revisited it in a long time. She argues that the emphasis on learning conventional writing actually opened opportunities for women. Oh, okay. Yes, so I'm sure that the advice that Harper's giving to her readers is encouraging the reading public to become, scholars and writers, just like how she is a writer. So in the literature that I'm reading about conventional writing materials, then, if just thinking about the Frederick Douglass example, then he learned from the copybook, and then he writes a slave narrative. And so I think Frederick Douglass is purposefully making a connection between learning from Webster's spelling book and I'm now an accomplished writer right now. But I also think that it enslaved people learning from these conventional writing materials. They're critiquing the US's or the dominant culture's inability to recognize them as citizens, which would give them then the right to kind of learn out in the open in actual schools, because they're enslaved. And so because these were the dominant pedagogical kind of materials used to learn how to read and write, and they were withheld from enslaved people, I think mentioning purposefully ABC manuals and Harry Jacobs incidents and Webster's spelling book and Douglass's slave narrative, they're doing this on purpose to make a commentary, to critique, a harsh criticism against their enslavement, against their inability to kind of be participants and citizens in a society, because an actual citizen would have open access to Webster's and open access to ABC manuals. So that's how I'm using these kind of conventional writing materials. And that's the kind of argument I'm making about them.
Great. Do we know what happened to Harper's personal library?
Yes, I saw that question. And she, I mean, it's interesting. I write about Harper in book number 1, on Black girlhood in the 19th century. And here I am writing about Harper again through the lens of libraries for this second book, because you can reread Frances Harper's and find new ways to analyze her text because they're so rich. And so I wanted to purposefully show a tradition of her talking about libraries excessively in all 3 of her serialized novels. And I don't know where where she bequeathed her books. In one of my chapters, I talk about Phyllis Wheatley's access to a neighbor, a minister named Mather Byles, who was one of the Wheatley's neighbor. And I write about how she walked across the street and was invited to use Mather Byles's private library, and how they became kind of writing partners, because there's evidence that Mather Byles calls Phyllis Wheatley his muse as he learns to write his own poetry. And so I know that where Mather Byles left his collection of books to the Massachusetts Historical Society. And so through that bequeathment of books, then I know what Phyllis Wheatley had access to. You know, I know what Phyllis Wheatley read. So these are the kind of avenues that I have to take to learn about Black women. And so to learn about Harper's library, I would have to know where she left her books or to whom she left her books, and then find a catalog of what those books consisted of. And no, I do not know where her books were left. So, and that's a great question.
Yeah, it's really hard to know what books people owned in the 19th century, because very few people wrote things down. This is an exciting, well, no, you can't see it. It's a neat little marbled notebook that just arrived in the mail at the library this past week. It's from a Scandinavian immigrant in Iowa in the 1890s, and he wrote a long list of all the books that he owned, which is fantastic because it's really hard to find. So Christine asks about the Philadelphia Mercantile Library's borrowing records. Do they still survive at the Free Library? And is it possible to find out what books Harper or anyone she loaned her ticket to read?
Yes, that's another great story if you have time to listen. So I had to learn what happened to the records of Philadelphia's Mercantile Library. So they were left to the Free Library of Philadelphia, which is on Vine Street in Philadelphia. And that's the huge public library in the middle of Philadelphia. And so I was like, oh, I'm currently in residence as a fellow at the Library of Company of Philadelphia. How fortunate for me. Let me write the librarian of the whole free Library of Philadelphia, introduce myself as a professor and see if I can gain access to these records. And then so I emailed her and she invited me in. We had a conversation. She said, these records are in our vault. They haven't even been processed. They've just been in our vault since 1989 when we collected these records. We can set you up in a conference room and you can look at these books, but there isn't a finding aid. And so yeah, I said yes. And so I made an appointment and someone wielding carts and carts of like binders and records, and I had to make sense of it. You know, there's like 5 carts of binders and there isn't a finding aid, you know, and this was way back in like 2017, this is how long I've been working on this book. And so I had to contact one of my mentors, Eric Gardner, who always does this kind of bibliographic kind of archival work. And I said, where do I begin? How do I find information about Harper in all of these records? And he said, that's like finding a needle in a haystack. You want to look for an African-American presence in the records. Look at, and then there was like huge stacks of library tickets, stacks. Mm-hmm. So I looked through some to see who are the Black people. And you have to do that. You have to find out, where did they live in Philadelphia? Where were the Black neighborhoods in Philadelphia? Connect the address to Black neighborhoods in Philadelphia. And that takes a long time. That takes help. That takes a research assistant to help you, which I didn't have. And so, yes, to answer the question, then the records of the Mercantile Library are still unprocessed in the vault of the Free Library of Philadelphia. The library company does have some records and those were the newspaper articles that I showed you, and those are cataloged. And so I was able to tell a great story about how the women being defeated and I kind of narrowed things down because I knew the library ticket was an 1880s library ticket. So I just focused on the decade of 1880, and that helped me narrow my research. And so sometimes you have to set your own parameters. And, doing all this research takes a toll on me and my body. As you can see, I'm wearing oxygen. And so I mean, everything is great in terms of finding resources, but another challenge is the health challenge, to people conducting this kind of hard work, this long work in the reading rooms. And I just want to acknowledge that as
well. Yeah, one of the best pieces of advice I got in graduate school was I asked a fairly complicated research question to one of my committee members, and he said, well, this is how you would go about answering that. This is where you would need to look to find out, but I don't know how interesting the answer will be, and life is short, and so you have to balance what the benefit is versus the cost. But you just highlighted a fantastic dissertation project for someone in the future to dive into those Mercantile Library records.
Yes, yes.
So I know we're running short on time. I just have one last question about both of your projects, which is you in both books you rely really heavily on children's literature as a source. And so can you talk a bit about the role that children's books written for children play in your work, which I think is something that sometimes people are a little surprised by?
Yes. Yes, because even as a graduate student, I am trained in archival research methods and African-American literature, not necessarily children's literature, which is a whole different discipline. And so as I wrote book one, then looking at the scholarship of children's literature helped me kind of read even more about the importance of the documents I was looking in, and especially reading the children's columns in the Black newspapers. And so, understanding the methodologies and understanding the theories behind children's literature were important. And that's something I had to learn as I was writing Black girlhood in the 19th century. And then I realized a lot of the books that I'm reading straight through an African-American literature lens, I needed to widen the way I looked at them and read them through an African-American children's literature lens, that many Black activists were writing for children, writing to children. And once I shifted that view, then you realize how the advice offered to children, Black children, was important, and how they were elevating Black children in this way. So that made me think about age, how age is a parameter of analysis that we should start considering, other than race, class, gender. age is now important, to show the distinctions between age. And that's another kind of theory that I emphasize in the introduction to Black One, meaning age is a critical way to read a text now. Once you kind of change the view of looking at everything through race, looking at it through age, and what kind of analysis can you learn from that? You know, you can learn a lot. What I learned is that, you know, Black women who were enslaved, they actually had a girlhood, so kind of understanding the differences between a Black girl and a Black woman when you're enslaved, because sometimes girls were having babies very young when you're enslaved. And so knowing the difference between a girl and a woman was a major priority for me in book one on Black girlhood in the 19th century. And so I was so honored to win the Honor Book Award from the Children's Literature Association in 2018 for book one. It meant that a whole field recognized the work that I was doing. It meant that my book contributed to children's literature in ways that I never imagined that it would. And so, yes, I feel like I've learned so much about myself as a scholar. I feel like my book has made such a huge impact. I mean, the book was published in 2016 and it's 2023 and it still has a life. People tell me that they teach it in their gender and women's studies classes, graduate classes. Like, the book is being read by graduate students all over nationwide. And people, I'm on dissertation committees at different universities other than University of Kentucky. I'm always the outside reader now for anyone writing a dissertation on Black girlhood, you know. And so yes, I'm busy, you know, a lot of requests. I feel like the work that I did is definitely coming to fruition. Like the recognition that I'm receiving is really wonderful. I would like to say that.
Well, I know how busy you are, and so I really appreciate you being with us this morning. Black girlhood is absolutely a model for how to use children's literature in particular in helping uncover some of these really complicated issues from our past. And I think I speak for everybody who's in our audience today when I say that I cannot wait to read this next book. For anybody who loves libraries and cares about them, I think it's going to be absolutely crucial. So I really look forward to it. And thank you so much for being with us. And Angela, do you have closing comments for us?
Just thank you so much. I learned a lot. It was fantastic. And we were so happy to host you today. And thank you to everybody for your great questions and comments as well. We appreciate that too.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, Nazera.
All right. Have a good
everybody.
weekend, everybody.
Bye.